Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. This week, everybody's probably out there at DattoCon, but if you just happen to have a few minutes on your hands to take a moment to listen to episode 100 of MSP 1337, you're in for a real treat as I have Brian Weiss back, who was episode 1 of this show. Now, 2 years later, where has he been and where has he gotten to with his journey recovering from a ransomware attack? Now, on with the show. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of MSP 1337. This week is different. This is episode 100, and I am thrilled to announce that I actually have Brian Weiss, who was the first episode ever for MSP 1337, back on the show to sort of pick up where we left off. We had talked about doing a two-part series all the way back 2 years ago, and the reality is 2 years was almost to the day when your specific incident occurred back in 2018. We had the conversation, what have you done since then besides, excessive drinking and going through some serious, drama. And today we're now 2 years past that. So it's been 4 years since that fateful day, roughly. Let's talk through some of the things that, you've changed or you have seen change in your company. I'm sure there's a lot we can talk about. You and I have been talking pretty much every week for the last year on topics related to both security within your business and how you're seeing that impact how you go about doing business with your clients. So, Brian, give us a quick recap on the incident that happened back in 2018 and sort of your story, if you will, that took you to our conversation 2 years ago, and then let's catch everybody up with what's happening today.
All right. So quick, I don't know if I could do quick, but I'll do my best. So back in 2018, it was actually March, is when it happened in 2018. We had our RMM infiltrated over the weekend. They basically started end of day Friday, all the way into Monday morning, trying to get into as many systems as they could. The type of RMM we had, if you left the session logged in, it would let you right in. And so unfortunately, those sessions will get you every time. That gave them admin access to a fair amount of servers. So literally half of our clients were infiltrated, which would have been all of them if we weren't already migrating off of that RMM. So we were moving off of it, but we only got half of our clients off of it. So the remaining half did get hit. It was about a 2-week cleanup process, green lighted all over time, brought in some extra resources. It's about $500,000 in total damages, about $250K out of pocket, of which after fighting tooth and nail with the insurance company, we did have cybersecurity insurance at the time, and we still do. They covered about 150 of it. So
real quick, I just want to throw this out there, not to get into the speeds and feeds of cyber insurance, that kind of thing, but one of the things that comes to mind for me as you were going through this is we can talk all day long about the tech that was used, who the RMM vendor was, but the reality is this stuff happens and we can't predict all of the pieces. Yours just happened to be one maybe that we would say is a little bit on the, did third party vendor should have been more engaged in preventing this from happening? Well, we don't need to go there. But what I do want to talk about though, real quick, is thinking about 2018. You went through this process of green light, let's get people back online, and this timeline of roughly 2 weeks to get everybody back. I think about today, 4 years later, if you're hit with an incident that involves, encrypted devices and all of the not so fun stuff that often comes with ransomware, the process to recovery isn't quite like it was. It wasn't so forgiving. Like you couldn't just, green light everything, because forensics now wants access, like halt, cease, don't touch anything. We've got to do our investigation. And you're like, I got clients that can't work. So maybe talk a little bit, like your thought process, like if this were to happen today, how this would have maybe played out differently, knowing the new stakes that are relatively new.
So yeah, it's interesting because back then the insurance company didn't really have any guidance for me. It was like, okay, give me all the details of what happened and what your costs are, and we'll see if we'll reimburse them, right?
Yeah, we're out of Kleenex. I'm still crying. Okay, like, can you send me some? Yeah,
And after we remediated it, the insurance company literally would just take our word. And I said, no, I want you to go hire an outside security company that you guys bring in to then confirm things are cleaned up and there's no back doors, right? Like I knew my team isn't a security team. We were
right.
just
You're a managed services company.
getting things back up and running. That's not to say there might be some back doors still, right? So
Right.
they did end up doing that and covering that cost, right? But I had to push them to do that. And nowadays, that's typically step one. You're calling insurance, you're making sure you're following their guidelines
Yeah.
to ensure you don't do something wrong, to potentially lose some of that forensic evidence that you need, right?
And you were reinsured right away, right? Like this wasn't like, hey, you went through this and they're like, hey, we're not going to insure you for 2 years.
Well, it gets even funnier. So I'm like, I'm never going to let this happen again. We're going to add these new security services that are going to cover these gaps. And they come back to me and they say, oh, wait, you're providing more security to your clients. Well, that's a higher risk for us. So we're not going to renew you.
Wait. So run this. So help me understand here. Your insurance provider is now choosing to not give you insurance, reinstate you with their program, because you're enhancing the security side of your portfolio.
They wanted a kind of a write-up, if you will, on how this won't happen again. Part of
Sure.
that was bring your security team in, have them, do an inspection, and then I'll tell you how we're changing our business to prevent this from happening again. And part of that change is we're going to add this security stack of extra tools and things.
Gotcha.
And they took that as, we're now going to have more liability with these clients because we're doing more security for them versus before we weren't. Right.
That the liability, where before might have been more of a shared liability with the client, like more responsibility on their part as a result of you doing and providing more, they were seeing it as you're taking on more of the risk yourself rather than the client having any sort of skin in the game.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I don't know that that's too far-fetched from what we're seeing today with some of it. Not that I get the funny on the tool side. I don't think that's really the case anymore, but I can understand how the responsibility, or what is covered in, say, your cyber insurance, where you're responsible, is a little bit different today than what would have been 4 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. So I look back at it, and really what it comes down to, like, if there's an MSP watching this today going, oh man, I hope that doesn't happen to me. And you're realizing that it can happen to you. You don't want to be head in the sand thinking it's not going to happen to you. You want to understand it can happen. I mean, really, I would have loved to have my MDR company, my SOC, watching all those devices, because
Sure.
the minute they saw that activity happening Friday evening, could have been alerted, could have mitigated, I shut the RMM server down, right? That's
Yeah.
easy.
So let's talk about that for a minute. So fast forward, we've talked about insurance. Obviously, that's extremely important. We're not for one second trying to downplay the necessity for cyber insurance, but it's important to make sure that you're going through what's being asked of you, to answer the questions truthfully, to make sure that the program you have in place does actually meet the needs of your company, and then worry about client needs, which is generally going to be, how are you helping them with their insurance policies, which should not be your insurance policy. So fast forward a little bit. I think about this a lot. I think about the clients that I've gone through incident recovery with. I'll even say the, post breach conversation of like, this happened, we had this exfiltration happen, it was this significant. And so we go back in time, and I'm not trying to say that every story is the same, because they're not. But I'll just give you an example. I had a client that had the exfiltration happen. The forensics takes place. They didn't even have cyber insurance, but we advised them to engage who their insurance company on their E&O insurance, engage with them on who they recommend. So I spent a lot of time, late nights talking to the forensics team and the legal team, and just kind of just piecing together like, what are the next steps? And of course, as you know from experience, we started adding in all of these different security tools and layers that would reduce the probability of it happening again. The interesting thing was that the client, as they moved through this process, never once talked to us about maybe what could have been done better to avoid this until much later in the conversation. So the way it took place, that's kind of scary, is it was tied directly to the escalation or IR model that the both the solution provider and IT teams had in place. And so the alarm started going off at like 2:00 in the morning. And it wasn't until 7:15 in the morning that anything was actually stopped. So 5 hours of bad stuff happening, because of that. And so what struck me as odd is, when's the last time, solution providers that are listening to this, when was the last time you did any evaluation of your escalation process, and who's on it, and what happens if that person's not available? Are there gaps in it? And I'm not even talking about tabletop exercises here, right? I'm just talking about, do you have any clue on what the escalation process is for any of those pieces? So like, and here's how I would experiment with it. It's Saturday. Who do I call first for anything? Maybe I just have like, my internet went down and I need to get to somebody to see what's the process for getting it back online. Not we've had bad things happen, right? Shoot, it could have been a backhoe in a driveway, right? But have we had that conversation? Like, it shouldn't be complicated to get through that step. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, we're going, just through all our clients right now, because we realize contacts change, and we've got like a list of 9 different contact types we want to know for each client, right? 2 of them are first emergency contact, second emergency contact, right? Someone that's willing to take ownership. We had one client whose Google Workspace shut down, as everyone knows, right? They just went to a paid thing.
Yeah.
For a month, we're trying to get a hold of them to warn them about this, and nothing, right? And it's like, okay, we need to reestablish contacts who are going to take ownership on your team to understand that it's a two-way street. And if we can't do this, we're going to have to part ways. Like, it just can't be all on us, and then no one on your team is willing to put an effort to help make decisions, right?
Right. So let's add fuel to the fire. How many of your clients are you LOA for something, right? Letter of agency, right? So like, maybe it's Verizon Wireless or AT&T or the ISP, you name it, right? How many of those clients have pre-existing LOAs with somebody else that haven't been canceled and voided out? I had that. We did a whole episode on that not too long ago, and I was floored. So me, once upon a time, I was a tech working for a construction company. I can give that out on the show. They had outsourced managed services. This is 2005. I literally got a phone call inside of the last 6 months asking me about Verizon and being on as letter of, basically being authorized to make changes for the entire company for over 150 cell phones, where I could add, remove, delete, you name it. I had carte blanche for the account, and I haven't worked there since 2008. So just throwing that out there, we're talking about the third party vendor. We're talking about like some of the internal stuff that you went through, the changes that you were making. How many of us are thinking about that piece?
Yeah. And it's 4 years since my incident. I've got PTSD when it comes to security. Most people, I think I'm crazy for everything that I go through. And I still have gaps. Like, it's an ongoing process that you're constantly revisiting. Now, most of the gaps we have are with our clients at this point
Sure.
in time, where they have this tech debt we got to get rid of. And if we can't get rid of it, we're probably parting ways with the client because it's too much of a risk for us.
So,
So
so talk about that. So we went through your 2 years when we talked last time, and I know a lot of the stories of since we did the conversation back in 2020. We've talked a lot about your client portfolio, where you want to shrink tech debt both internally and with what your clients are seeing. You've even seen, I don't want to call it tech debt, but almost like employee debt. We talked about this within your organization of seeing complacency, and this isn't a judgment against any of the techs that were with your company. It's we're all guilty of it, right? We get good at something. We have a process that we follow, and we really don't have anything more than blinders on to change in that process. And so when someone new comes in and shows us, hey, there's a way better way of doing that, most cases we're receptive to that, right? But complacency, it exists, and it's something that we have to culturally, choose to change. And so that happened to you. You ended up losing several resources, got three new ones, and all of a sudden your own employees are tackling this security mindset that you've been trying to, entrench in the company for the last couple of years, right? So now we're 4 years in, and you're seeing real change that's no longer tied to what does Brian Weiss think about security. It's what does my company and what do the employees in my company understand that's part of their responsibility as we tackle security. So what are some of the big ticket items for you as you're thinking about, passing or disseminating this information on to other MSPs? Like, what are some big ticket items that you're like, these are deal breakers, whether it's tech debt or maybe it's the lack of acceptance on change because you're saying, hey, we've got to elevate the security solutions that we have in here. It can't be about, well, it's just not in our budget. Well, getting a breach is not in your budget either.
yeah, I think the really the main thing is the client willing to take ownership on their tech debt? And does even the client even know what tech debt means, right? So we've shifted over the past probably 3 to 4 months. A lot of our conversations with clients are now talking about the things they need to upgrade or fix or replace or add as a form of tech debt. And it's their tech debt. It's not our tech debt. When something goes wrong with this because you didn't upgrade it, it's not our fault. It's because you haven't addressed that tech debt yet, right? And so we do help clients prioritize, okay, which tech debt should they get rid of first? But it is an ongoing roadmap discussion to the point where we got rid of that tech debt. What's the next set of tech debt we get rid
Like
of?
it's a perpetual cycle that never ends, right? It's the so let me ask you a question, because I think it's easy to associate tech debt with things that have been around for a long time as opposed to the way things maybe are licensed or the way things are patched, where once upon a time you bought a license, that product was good forever. You just didn't get any new versioning of that product. And kind of a case in point, we saw this in the alerts that are out there for Apple products, where Apple had to release a security vulnerability patch to iOS 12. Hey, anybody running an Apple phone that's still on iOS 12? Like, it didn't even dawn on me that that's possible, right? Like that would be an example of tech debt, right? So the one that comes to mind for me that's easy to wrap my head around is the evolution of QuickBooks, right? So we remember back in the day when you bought your CD and you installed QuickBooks software, or maybe you downloaded it. I'm not trying to say that this is back in the day when we had CD-ROM drives in our computers or floppy drives. But there was a huge shift where products went from you bought the product to you subscribed to the product, whether it was an on-prem application that ran on your device or it was a cloud web browser type application. The model was the same, just where it was installed might have been different. Are you running into that being one of those challenges where it's like, what do you mean I suddenly have to renew my QuickBooks license versus, I don't have any issues with running QuickBooks 2012 edition because we're not using it for taxes, right? Or maybe we're just using it for inventory. How do you educate on that? Because I think that's really difficult today when it's like cost done, don't need to spend more. It's a fixed asset now. How do you educate through that mindset that's like, well, what you're telling me is I'm just going to spend money. This is an ongoing, always happening expense.
So it's really hard with smaller clients because a lot of times they aren't that mature and they've got a mentality of, we've been doing it this way the past 10 years. Why can't we continue?
This is
right?
how we've always done it.
With larger clients, they're a little more educated, mature. I mean, it really comes down to the idea that the old days of budgeting, where you had these CapEx expenses to save up for and then spend all at once and then depreciate over time, have really gone away. Everything's moving to OpEx now. And part of that reason is because everything's moving out to the cloud, and those cloud cost resources. And there's teams that are helping keep those resources secure, right? And so you now have something where you used to buy it and own it yourself and take full ownership over it and then, depreciate it, to now you're subscribing to something for little to no upfront cost, right? Which, in most cases, a lot of the things that have moved to OpEx, even if you compare to CapEx, they're not too far off, right? And there's other factors with CapEx we tell clients about too. When you own the equipment and we got to replace it, you also have to pay for the labor to replace it. When you're subscribed to a service out in the cloud, you're not owning that hardware anymore, right? So
you're trading CapEx now for OpEx.
Yeah, exactly. So it's that type of discussion, but with smaller businesses, they tend to kind of brush it off like, I don't agree with you, right?
Right.
And so that's where it becomes difficult. But you're right. I mean, networking equipment's probably the one out there right now that most people complain about. Why do I have to pay a license fee for this AP that I just put in? Well, it's cloud managed and allowed to keep you more secure and up and running, less downtime, right? Because we can remotely manage this thing. So they don't really get that as much as like a large company just knows they don't want downtime. They want to mitigate risk. They want to know, what are people doing today to be successful versus what were people doing 10 years ago to be successful. Right?
What you're actually describing, and it's kind of interesting to think about this, is we used to have static products, right? We had products that had shelf life of roughly a year plus, right? I think the average dev cycle used to be, back in the day, it was like 18 months before you'd see not even a major release, right? You might see it go from like 5.1 to 5.2 or 5.3, like in that cycle. We saw it a lot with Apple products over the years, right? Like you basically could predict about 12 to 18 months, you'd see a new major release of their operating system. Obviously Windows didn't follow that same path, but I think theirs was more like 2 to 2.5 years and then some. But what's interesting is, because of the new connected world we're in, those products actually become, in theory, less vulnerable and less risky. The problem is getting our clients, getting that mindset shift to say, no, you're buying into a more protected ecosystem. And I realize we're saying that's a suggested idea. We're not saying that it is true, because we've got other evidence to support otherwise. But I think the more we get on that bandwagon, the less risk over time we will see, because when there is something wrong, it can be quickly addressed. Like today, you think about it, like if I had an offline version of QuickBooks running on my computer and there's a vulnerability to it, well, I'm at the mercy of my solution provider or someone internally in our company to go, oh yeah, we need to go manually update QuickBooks.
Which typically would happen like once a year, because you have a bunch of users using it all the time and you don't want to have to go and update all their workstations every single time.
Sure. and that's true. Like that's a real thing. That's a real challenge that we all face. I mean, no one out there that's running a managed service provider organization is like, man, if only I had to touch more workstations on any given day, that would just really float my boat. So, well, okay, so we've kind of covered the gamut here. The last piece that we've talked about over the last couple of years, since the last time you were on, or since the last time we talked about what you've gone through, was now getting into how you are shifting your portfolio of clients. Like you want a certain, you're going after a certain market that's unique? And please fill us in on why that is, because I think it's largely important that everybody understands that this is obviously not necessarily everybody's path, nor should it be. But I think what's important, the silver lining in this, is to know what your portfolio looks like. No different than if you were looking at the stock market and trying to wrap your head around, your mid, your high, your low cap investments. Because at the end of the day, with the economy the way it is, it's an ebb and flow, right? The tides are changing. The whatever you want to call it is shifting. Having everything in one category may be totally catastrophic to your organization if something changes. So walk us through a little bit how you came to the decision of going after what I believe you refer to as co-managed IT.
Yeah. So, I mean, it comes from a couple different places. It comes from our business becoming more mature by working with larger clients who helped push the envelope to help us become more mature. It's been about things like implementing EOS and understanding how to run an organization on a process kind of more efficiently based accountability and ownership platform. And also the impact, right? I went through this event 4 years ago, thought it was going to take me out of business, questioned whether or not I still wanted to be an MSP, right? I mean, I was like, at one point in time, I was like, I'm going to get out of this. But what happened is I put my head down. I said, no, I'm going to learn what I need to learn about security and compliance to understand how I should be delivering services. So I put a huge amount of effort into just trying things out, like learning 12-hour days. And then I take all this knowledge back to my small business clients and try to help educate them on the reason that they need all of this. And it's an uphill battle. And all of a sudden I'm like, what? I put in all this hard work. I went through this serious event where like I've got PTSD about security. So I'm here to keep you protected, client, right? And then my clients don't want to even be protected. And then I'm realizing they're less mature than we are, and they're actually holding us back from being able to make a larger impact in our industry. So as the years have gone by, we've picked up some co-managed clients who have really helped drive us and who welcome these security suggestions and things. And it's less administrative overhead. And we're working with internal IT departments that speak our same language.
Sure.
And it's basically it's a maturity thing, right? I would have never fathomed that I'd be working with these larger companies and even going mid-market and enterprise now as kind of a VAR even, right? Or VAM as I like to call it. But I'm here now, and now I don't want to work with small businesses because they're harder to work with than these larger businesses.
I can attest to that. I remember when we were in the process of it was the last couple of years before we sold our MSP, we had landed some really large companies that had internal IT departments. And some cases they were more help desk than the higher resources, level 2, level 3 engineers. But what was really interesting is how many tools and resources that we have access to that the mid-market and enterprise can't get access to directly.
Yep.
I was floored. Like, we sat down with one of the clients that we worked with. They had no idea they could consume some of the resources that we were going to give them access to. I don't want to say a la carte, but they didn't have to buy the $100,000 software package to find out whether or not the product would be a good fit for their company. They could literally go, we have 1,000 seats. We're like, well, that'll be X dollars a month. And they're like, no way. How's that possible? We're used to writing checks for $2 million. You're telling me I can have it for $1,500 a month? Yep. And you guys will help us deliver, implement, and manage? Yep. And all we have to do is allow the reporting, the tickets, and the incidents to report through your system, not just our system. Yep. Where do we sign? And then to your point, smaller businesses, they don't know what those tools are for because they don't have internal IT departments.
Yeah. And, another interesting observation I've had too is I've been to plenty of channel events, and I kind of have an idea of kind of the average MSP out there, right? As far as a maturity level. And most of these larger companies that I'm working with, while their, administration, business operations is much more mature than a small business, I'm finding their IT departments and how they run are less mature than the average MSP. So
Right.
literally the average MSP, if you felt like you had the skills to go into a larger client and help them out, right, with that conversation, you're going to find the IT departments sometimes don't even have RMMs yet. And you're like, how have you been running things without an RMM?
Well, because they have an Excel spreadsheet and they've got Windows, what's this server running, and sometimes it works. So they've been kind of resigned to that. I think it's the same challenge we have in the SMB space. It's all about education. So if I think about what I can buy in the enterprise space, you could probably count on one hand the number of players that provide solid RMM tools to that group. And when you go talk to a managed service provider, suddenly they have access to a product stack that they've never heard of before or haven't been able to get their hands on before. And it does way more than they ever dreamed of. And they don't have to configure, set it up, or implement it themselves. It just is, please install this on your server or on your endpoint, and we'll handle the rest.
And there's also something to be said too, where traditionally internal IT is somewhat siloed. They don't get that experience. Like their management isn't sending them to conferences saying, go find out a better way to do it. So management, when we come in, they're like, oh, wait, you guys have gone to all these conferences. You guys know all this. You're doing this with other companies and it's successful. Wow, my IT department doesn't have to do all this research to determine what do we need to do next to move the ball. So the IT departments love it because they get the justification that they've kind of been wanting for a while. Because it's not like they enjoy not using an RMM. I'm sure some of them know about it, but they're just not getting approval to in the budget for it, right? Because
Absolutely.
Management's like, you've been doing your job this way the past 10 years. Why can't you continue doing it the same?
Right. So as we're kind of running out of time here, I want to shift gears because I think there's one big area that we really haven't touched on, and I think part of it you've alluded to through co-managed IT. I think it happens there quite a bit, being able to be a resource to make recommendations on tools and services based on your experience of going to events that a lot of that mid-market enterprise doesn't spend time sending their staff to. And I think that gets into we use this term a lot in the MSP space, VCIO or account management, or some of that CIO consulting type services. And I think it's unfortunate that we did that for so long without it being a paid engagement, or in a lot of cases, not including that as part of the paid part of the managed services agreement. It just kind of got included over time. There's obviously a big shift happening, and we've talked about the security side of this, is that clients are relying on their solution provider to be more than just make sure I can print, get on the internet, and finish my report or whatever it is from for the company that I work for. We're starting to see this genuine demand, like real, earnest look at my solution provider saying, hey, help me understand ransomware, help me understand my obligations, my responsibilities to my employees and staff. It's changing, right? Are you seeing real opportunities here to provide true consulting services, as I hate to use the term CISO, but like security officer or security leadership guidance to your clients, where it's like, hey, we're not expecting you to include this for free. I think the mid-market enterprise is ripe for those resources because they don't have a budget for a CISO, and your SMB clients don't have a budget anyway, so they're not considering that. But I think it's a trickle-down effect, right? So if you're seeing this with your mid-market enterprise clients, I can only imagine that we're going to get to a point in the next 12 to 18 months where your smaller clients that maybe were resistant to the tech, maybe are resistant to the services you're currently trying to put in there because they need them, to basically going, hey, we're no longer providing you with managed services, but for a monthly retainer, we'll tell you exactly what you need to be doing, and what you do with that information is up to you.
Yeah, I mean, your point about how we've shifted our client base, we kind of have three buckets of clients now, and it's based on our risk profile and kind of coming down to how we are in the supply chain. So our fully managed clients, we're like completely in the supply chain, right? And so they have the highest risk profile, which means if they aren't following our recommendations, that's a concern. We might have to fire, get rid of the client, right?
Well, and it may be a conversation to have, like, hey, I wonder what their insurance company thinks these guys are doing.
that too. We've decided to cap that at 50. So we had like 75. We've fired several, switched out a bunch, and we're down to about 50 now.
So you're doing it based on numbers that are not necessarily dollars.
Correct, because we'll take on a new fully managed client if we like them better than one of our existing, and typically that means they're larger and more mature, right?
Sure.
And the idea is that we always want to be doing, right? We do want that fully managed set of clients, which we're using the tools day in and day out to manage, so that we can better support co-managed or VAR. Now, co-managed is, I got like a foot in the supply chain, right? I'm not 100% responsible for everything, maybe responsible for some things, but the client's taking a fair amount of ownership on things, right?
Yeah, and you see that a lot with the Department of Defense, like your CMMC, CUI type clients, where they are involved in one small piece of a much larger supply chain.
Yep, exactly. And then what I'm really excited about is really this VAR or VAM. I don't like the connotation VAR because just the historical relationship you have with VARs typically isn't that great. So I like VAM, which is value added MSP instead.
Wow,
But it's
that's
the
like
idea.
two M's.
Yeah, that's an acronym within an acronym. What's cool about these clients is a lot of times they don't want you in their supply chain. You can't be in their supply chain, or I don't want to be in their supply chain, but they need access to literally what you just talked about, kind of that consulting, that peace of mind. Are we doing things the right way? Are we going the right direction? Are there tools that we could be using to make our lives easier that we can't buy directly, that maybe this person could resell to us and provide first line of support, so we don't have to contact a vendor? A lot of IT departments hate vendors. They don't hate calling vendors for support. So when they have us as a middle person who knows the product well and speaks their same language and knows them intimately as a client versus some random vendor support person,
Sure.
it makes for this great relationship that's almost like a trifecta of accountability. And in one of our largest co-managed clients, I love the situation we have there because we're their MSP, they have internal IT, and they have an MSSP. And we all three regularly meet and talk about objectives and different things we're responsible for and what's next. And it keeps management happy because management knows we're all holding each other accountable, right?
I think that is you said trifecta. I think that's a fair statement. I think the reality is a managed service provider is not an MSSP. And I hate the acronyms that are thrown around out there, or the hype, or the marketing hype, the hoopla, if you will, that says, join our webinar and we'll help you transition from MSP to MSSP. Well, what does that even mean? Like, you're saying that I'm going to go from managing a portfolio of clients and being their solution provider for everything from printing to getting them a new laptop, and now you're telling me the only thing I'm going to do is manage their firewalls? Because at the end of the day, if we're getting down to brass tacks, an MSSP does not do everything for everybody. They do one or two things really, really well, and that's it. So to your point, I think it's a huge step in the direction that we've talked about for years. We said this back in the day when we talked about VoIP services or copier or print services. It's like, do you want to do all of those things? Because odds are that's not why you got into managed services. It was like, hey, someday all I want to do is manage those firewalls. That's it. Someday I want to just be the guy swapping out the tapes and the tape backup. That's all I want to do. No, you said it yourself. Like, we get excited about doing the things that we started out doing 5, 6, 10, 20 years ago. That gets us passionate about taking care of our clients. So to think that we're going to be everything to everybody, no. And the opportunities to partner with MSSPs and other key components to an ecosystem that help an enterprise or a small business be successful. I mean, shoot, you're actually taking the cost and saying, hey, we're only paying for that piece that matters. It's not a huge cost because it's not one vendor responsible for all of those tools and overhead that puts that vendor going, oh, in order for me to deliver that, I got to really raise the price in order to get that done.
Yeah.
So Brian, I see what's the future look like. We've got you're gonna be at DattoCon next week. So for those of you listening, this will actually go live on Tuesday while we're at DattoCon. I'm pretty sure we'll probably be headed to some event happening outside of the event. But hey, That's coming up next week. If you haven't and you are a CompTIA member, I encourage you to check out the ISAL and the cyber forums, because a lot of the stuff that we talked about today is an opportunity for a solution provider to get access to some of that information and resources without having to spend lots of money on third-party vendor resources. For those of you listening, I appreciate your support. Have a great week.
See ya.
See ya.